Well, it's the world's fastest growing region economically, but South Asia needs to keep embracing globalization and focus on exports if it's to follow in the path of its eastern neighbors. That's the message of the World Bank's biannual report on the region, which includes countries like India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. My colleague Paul Barber spoke to the bank's chief economist for South Asia, Martin Rama. He asked what rising protectionism in the West could mean for the region.
What we did for this report was a series of hypothetical scenarios and analysis. And what we find is that while, of course, it makes sense to worry because globalization has been so important for development, we don't think that South Asia should worry too much, and especially we don't think that South Asia should change track. Global integration is a very important priority. Now there are people saying, oh, let's forget about exports, let's look at the domestic market. We'll say that will be a wasted opportunity. And we say that for several reasons. One is if there was protectionism across the board, the losses for South Asia will exist, but will not be too large. If there were more selective protectionism, where some countries may be more targeted than others, in fact, there could even be opportunities for South Asia. And for now, something that at one level it's perhaps regrettable, which is the fact that we are not seeing more progress on the mega regional trade agreements. Everything that goes in the direction of more global integration, we believe, is very positive. But these were agreements in which no South Asian country was involved. So the fact that they stalled, when seen from a South Asian perspective, is not necessarily bad news. So overall, the message in this report is, sure, winds are changing in the world, but that should not affect South Asia. One last thing, one very important thing, as I mentioned before, South Asia exports mainly to Europe, mainly to the United States. And we see advanced economies growing faster. So there will be more demand for South Asian exports, regardless of what happens with trade policy. And that, again, will be good news.
And what about within these South Asian countries? Are you seeing a rise in protectionism, populism there too?
No, I think the political dynamics of these countries are, I would say, quite disconnected from what we see elsewhere. What, yes, we see is that unlike East Asia, which is very strongly integrated within, if you think of ASEAN, if you think of the value chains where Chinese companies, Japanese companies are involved, there's much less of that in South Asia. South Asia is the least integrated region in the world.
We've seen recently the demise of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP. Does that have any bearing on South Asia, and are there any free trade deals or zones that South Asia could get on board with?
The demise of TPP, at least in the form that has been discussed, of course, may not necessarily be a good thing for the world economy because, among other things, TPP was going to set higher standards in many areas. But from a South Asian perspective, the fact that no South Asian country was part of TPP means that there was concern in the region that they will be marginalized from trade. There was the perception that, for instance, Vietnam will gain enormously and Bangladesh could lose considerably. So from that point of view, again, is not necessarily bad news as seen from South Asia.
And have you seen a positive appetite for the Belt and Road Initiative, especially for countries like Pakistan, which border China?
I would say in general, across South Asia, there is enormous appetite to think about corridors. This is a region that could be a hinge between East Asia and Europe. So if you put it in a longer-term perspective, there's no doubt, and there are all sorts of initiatives, many of them building on historic links. If you think of the old trunk road in the case of India and South Asia, if you think of the Silk Road. So there are lots of initiatives. I think in the case of Pakistan, we see a lot of movement going on. But across the entire region, for instance, now connecting through Bangladesh towards Myanmar for South Asia has become also extremely important.
And what about China's role? Is it seen as purely a rival, especially for India, or is it really a partner for the region?
I think both rivalry can be a good thing. When it challenges you, when it forces you to make decisions, when you realize that the game is high, I think that's a very stimulating thing. And we see prospects for collaboration. We see quite a lot happening through different initiatives where China is involved. China has strong partnerships with several of the countries in the region. So we tend to believe that is a positive role. In a way, there is still a difference with East Asia. Is South Asian countries export mainly to advanced countries. East Asian countries export a lot to China as part of a value chain. So the integration, the commercial links with China are a bit different compared to those in East Asia. But overall, I would say it's a positive influence.